Hey everyone, well, welcome to Monday Live. I said I'd be going live at 2 o'clock, so it's 2 p.m. in South Africa. It's cold and rainy here in Stellenbosch, and all I can think about is how to make some curries and delicious naan braids. But be that as it may, today I am here to encourage you that the times we find ourselves living in are the days where we have seeds being sown into us for our future. I really believe that these times that we're living in now are actually seeds that will shape our future in more ways than we can imagine. It all depends how we use this time. And so my hope is that as you watch these videos, as you process some of the questions that I'm going to ask, that it will shape your life and prepare you to thrive in the days that come. So we are around about day 10 of lockdown, and the novelty's worn off. This morning I spent about 40 minutes running around my garden and exercising. I ran about 6.5 kilometers on my property, and just thinking about things, how the novelty has worn off. But the fact is that this time is a time where seeds are being sown. So today I'm going to speak to you a little bit about that, about how we need to pivot, how we need to adjust our thinking. Then I'm going to be giving you a few questions that you could ask and process during the next few days. Hopefully there'll be some thought-provoking questions, and then I'm going to just give you a brief encouragement as to how we can think about these days that we find ourselves living in. So if you're watching, give me a thumbs up or a heart emoji or whatever it is that you can find easily just to say hi. If you have questions along the way, ask them of me. Probably going to take about 10 minutes of your time. So settle in and get comfortable, make yourself a cup of tea while we're chatting, and I hope that you'll find it encouraging. So the passage that I've been thinking of lately is from Psalm 118, where it says, "Out of my deep anguish and pain, I prayed. And God, you helped me as a father. You came to my rescue and broke open the way into a beautiful and broad place. Now I know, Lord, that you are for me and that I will never fear. What can man do to me?" So Psalm 118 has been a very real passage for me during these days, knowing that if God is for us, no one is against us. In these times where we have to pivot, pivoting means to use disruption and welcome change. So we're going to realize that as change is happening, and will continue to happen, we have to pivot in our thinking. We have to welcome this change. We have to use this disruption of the way we live to transform us into something going forward, into how we do business, how we handle relationships, how we connect with people, how we live our life. We have to allow this disruption to bring things up in our hearts, process them well, and then think forward how we're going to live going forward. So one of the ways that we need to pivot, because pivoting, remember, is kind of turning and changing direction. We almost have to transform our thinking and metamorphosize, so to speak. We have to become and grow into something different. It takes time and it takes intentionality. So one of the questions that you can ask yourself is, how adaptable am I? When we face times like this, where this morning I read that over half of the world's population, so that's more than 50% of the entire world's population, are in lockdown at the moment. In some form or another, we are being isolated, more than 50%. That's billions of people. That's a crazy, crazy number of people. If they are in lockdown and we're in lockdown, the world will look different going forward. So we have to be adaptable. If we want to pivot, we have to adapt, and that is my encouragement to you today, is how can you adapt? How can you adapt in your business, in the marketplace, your relationships, the way you do family, the way you do life? We live in what we call a VUCA world. So some of you who've heard me speak of that before, bear with me, but VUCA is a military term. I think it's from the 80s or 90s. It stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. We really live in a VUCA world. So the world is volatile at the moment. We see there's a shaking all over the world. It's uncertain. The world, everything is uncertain. We don't know if lockdown will be extended or not. We don't know what's going to happen with the rand dollar exchange rates. We don't know what's going to happen in business, in the marketplace, how we will recover. It's uncertain. it's complex. So when something is complex, there are many interconnecting parts that affect each other. And therefore, we cannot go back to the way things were, because all these parts that affect each other influence each other, and then they form something different. And so if we look at all these interconnecting parts happening around the world and how it's affecting us, we cannot go back to life to the way it was. And then we have an ambiguous world. So there is so much fake news out there. I don't know if you read it as well about the South Africa's battling with fake news because we don't know what's true and what's not. And so we have to wrestle with this fake news. So the ambiguous truth is so ambiguous. We don't know what it looks like. We live in a VUCA world. When we understand that we live in a VUCA world, it then gives us the kind of the courage to pivot. So remember, pivot means to utilize the disruption and welcome change in our lives. So how can you welcome this change, welcome the disruption in your life? How can you pivot in your life? So some of the questions that I'd like you to process going forward, and please feel free to message me and I can send them to you so you don't have to write them down right now, is how adaptable am I at the moment? What are my values? Because we live out of our values, whether we know what they are or whether we don't know what they are, we live out of our value system. And so try and figure out what your values are in this time that we're in, and going forward, what are your values? What do you believe strongly about? How can you live according to your values? And then where are you now? Where are you at? What's going on in your heart? What's going on in your emotions? What's going on in your body? What's happening in your life? So how can you pivot? How can you welcome this disruption and get an understanding and awareness of where you're at right now so that you could change and you could grow and you could adapt? And then do you know what your goals are? You know, my goals prior to the coronavirus were probably, there were a few that were different to what they would be now if I actually sit down and reflect. And just as I'm sharing about how we need to pivot, how we need to prepare for the future, how this time are seeds of hope for the future, I'm going to be doing this processing too. So what are my goals looking like going forward for the rest of the year, for next year, for the next 3 to 5 years? I was hoping to have gone to a number of countries this year. I had some traveling planned. The way I was going to launch my book was going to be different. I had a speaking tour planned around South Africa, and it was all ready to go. Suddenly the coronavirus happened and everything changed. I had to pivot. I had to welcome this change and shift in the way I did things, the way I launched my book, the way I'm viewing the things that I want to do going forward, how I'm going to live my life has to change. If you have children, if you're a mom or a dad and you're watching, let me know if you're a parent, because I'd like to speak a little bit into parenting. But my daughter's in matric at the moment, and I am seeing firsthand how the stress of doing online learning and everything at home, with the wondering what's happening with the June, July exams coming up. She's feeling the stress, she's feeling the pressure, and I'm going to do another Facebook Live at a later stage addressing parents with children, especially with teenagers, how to help them navigate this stressful time. But the goals that we had and I had in my life have to change a little bit, and so it would do me good if I had to spend some time thinking, what do I really want in the next 3 to 5 years? They're saying it's going to take years to recover from this coronavirus period that we're in right now. So we have to pivot. We have to welcome this adjustment. We have to welcome the change. Perhaps let me know, how do you feel about change? How does it affect your life? Change isn't easy. You know, it requires an internal transformation as well as an external outworking. So we have to learn to navigate change. When we navigating this pivotal period, this important period of our life, and to pivot, we have to ask questions. So there is a lot of wisdom in asking questions. I actually wrote a quote down by Voltaire. He said, "Judge a man by his questions rather than his answers." So think about that. What questions could you ask in your life right now that will open up the doors to the next 3 to 5 years? Do you need to meet with a coach or speak to someone or get advice? What questions can you ask that will uncover things? Because if you're like me, I'm feeling a little bit uncomfortable today. I don't know, some people had tough days yesterday, but just the days are not that easy. Some days they're fun. I'm thinking, yes, I can do this. And other days I am desperate to get out and see my friends and interact with people and face to face, not through social media. And so these days are very uncertain and it's tough. I'm not going to lie, it is tough. I struggle too. And so we need each other. If you're familiar with Enneagram or some of the personality profiles, I'm a 7. Sevens love partying. Sevens love adventure, trying new things, doing lots of different things. But that self-awareness of how I am, for example, as a 7, as Enneagram, helps me also figure out this time. So in this time of where we need to accept that change is here and things are changing, how could you come to a place of self-awareness, of understanding where you are and who you are and how you're wired, and then you work with that, so you flow with it. You don't fight against it, but if you understand that this is what energizes me, this is what I'm passionate about, then you can start to pursue those things. The other day, my daughter Emily and I watched Bethany Hamilton's movie Unstoppable, and it's a documentary about her life. But one of the things she said in the movie that really struck me was her and her husband spoke about what they were passionate about, and then they decided to go after that. Fearlessly decided to go after the things they were passionate about. So this is the most perfect time, guys, to think about, what are you really passionate about? What makes your heart come alive? What makes you thrive? What makes you happy? What makes you feel like, yes, I was made for this, for such a time as this? How could you pursue that? So think about it in this time. Even you could draw flow charts, you could collage things if that's your thing. You could draw. I cannot draw to save my life. I prefer to write and verbally process with some people, but what makes you come alive? How could you do that? And when we figure out what that is, we must be prepared that there are going to be obstacles. And those obstacles could be fears, they could be insecurities, they could be practical challenges that we have to overcome. Because anything worth fighting for has obstacles. So if you're feeling like a dream is coming up in your heart now, even as I'm talking, you can say, yes, Mandy, actually this is what I'm passionate about. Write it down. Don't let it go. And then figure out, how could you pursue that? Because pivoting is using, as I said in the beginning, pivoting is using this disruption and welcoming the change. So it's the opposite of stagnating. And we're not going to stagnate during this time, guys. I really don't want any of you to stagnate. And if you're feeling stuck, please reach out to me. You can send me a direct message. You could email me through my website, mandyhart.net, or hello@mandyhart.net is my email address. But reach out. You are not stuck. I could send you a number of questions that you could answer that will help you through this time. So this is all this to say is that these days of lockdown are really the seeds for our future. I really believe deep in my heart that this time will shape our lives for the next 10 to 20 years. If you take the time to process kind of your shadows, your fears, the uncomfortableness in your life, take the time to process that well, because in doing so, you're kind of pulling out some weeds and you're giving the dream that's inside of your heart room to grow. You're nourishing it, you're feeding it. I'm going to be doing a part 2 later during this week about pivoting and adjusting and creating some PDFs, some material that you could write and reflect on, and give you some more practical tips. So to sum up, what have we spoken about over the past few minutes? I've told you what pivoting is. It's time for using disruption and welcoming the change to adapt and prepare for our future. I've spoken about how this time in lockdown, even if it's extended, this time in lockdown is actually the seed for potential for our future dreams and visions. Imagine what the businesses are going to look like in the days to come. They could be incredible. In the Chinese language, crisis equals opportunity. And so this crisis time we're in is an incredible time for opportunity. So I've spoken a bit around that. I've spoken about what questions to ask yourself. You could ask yourself, what am I passionate about? Where am I going? Where do I want to be in the next 3 to 5 years? What do I want my life to look like? What are the obstacles that I'm facing? We spoke about VUCA world. If you don't know what it is and you just joined me, go back and listen to the first part, but we live in a VUCA world. We spoke about values, how important it is to figure out what our values are. And so when we combine those things, and we start to put them together, a picture emerges. And I believe that vision will start to grow in your heart. Dreams will be rekindled, and you can really live a fearless life going forward. So that is my hope and my encouragement to you today. Please, again, reach out. If you're having a tough day, don't deal with it alone. Reach out. And I look forward to chatting to you on the next Facebook Live. But have a great Monday, everyone. Cheers.